Hello, everyone, and welcome to Geeks Camp, the home of RPG goodness and general tomfoolery. My name is Zach, and the hosts joining me this evening, our special guests, we have Danny, Susan, and Bruce. How are you, fine folks?
Doing
We're
great.
good.
Doing
We're
well.
good. We're good. We're excited about all the stuff that's been happening lately. So it's good.
This is a lot of people for me to chat with on my lonely lonesome. I'm missing backup in this
Yeah,
challenge.
Troy and
John, yeah.
or Zach or John. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, okay, so first off,
We'll be
thank
gen- we'll be gentle. We'll be gentle, Zach.
Oh, I appreciate that. No, don't be gentle. That is not what this audience demands or
Okay,
desires.
okay,
So
good.
All right.
yeah,
We'll rough
All
it
right.
up.
So I just want to make sure that I'm hearing that you've given us consent to be rough.
I have
Yeah.
yes.
we just,
I may regret that later, but yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's
Well,
do
I
it.
think you're already starting to regret it now.
Yeah, I wasn't until you asked for clarity, and then I'm like, wait a minute, I may have made a mistake. Um, okay, well, hey, I've known you guys now for a while, especially Danny. But you're new to the show. So, Danny, why don't we start with you and just give us a quick rundown of who you are, and then we'll move to Susan and then to Bruce.
Great. My name is Danny Grimes. I am a writer and game designer. I wear a lot of other hats too. We also have a company that does other stuff that's related to gaming. But basically, this what we're doing now with World of Game Design is kind of the culmination of like what I've always wanted to do.
Hmm.
So, producing stuff. It was that dream when I was 12. Like someday I'm going to be able to do this for a living, and I am now doing it for a living. So,
Hey.
yeah, attending a lot of conventions, running a lot of games with Bruce and Susan and other people too, but primarily them. And just really looking forward to being able to create more and more stuff, especially in horror genres, stuff like that. That's my jam.
Sweet. Susan?
Uh, I am a writer and longtime player, at least, of D&D, and even going way back. I played Chill way back in its first incarnation,
Nice.
and always loved that horror genre, or Cthulhu-esque, investigating the supernatural and all that kind of thing, and then fighting weird monsters, and this is really my first dabble into getting to write an adventure, although I have played in many and really enjoy doing that. And it's kind of fun writing something that's more creative. I tend to write more news pieces and stuff
Mhm.
for a local paper. And so, yeah, I'm very excited having the opportunity to get to write something more fun.
Fantastic. How about you, Bruce?
I am a writer, designer. My job that currently pays most of the bills right now is designing escape rooms, which is kind of fun.
Wow.
And I am, like Dan and Susan, and I suspect yourself, one of those people that started playing role playing games in high school and then never quit. I have played and run just about every genre of gaming, multiple different systems. I love Cthulhu and horror. It's always fun to as a player to role play, being in the midst of all kinds of weird, insane things going on, the world ending, and as a GM, it's fun to drive players and to drive characters insane,
Well,
and
yeah.
and hopefully give the players some feeling the willies more than once.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I am thrilled to have you guys on because as you've already said in your little intros there, like you're horror fans and specifically your Elder God fans, the Cthulhu mythos, and that's very cool. Has a special place in my heart, and I'm really excited that with a full disclosure here, I get to help you guys put together just on the fringes. I get to help you guys put together elements of the campaign for this project. So it's been very cool, and I'm very excited to play it. when it's released and check it out. So tell me, let's get this out of the way. Not that I mean you're here for this reason, but let's get it out of the way. What project are we here to talk about or discuss today, Danny?
Well, we well, first of all, I just want to say really briefly, Zach underplays his role in all of this. Zach has been a really strong supporter of creativity and has not put a lot of constraint on us, other than the real world constraints of like this is what works, this is what doesn't, and helping guide us through a lot of that. But he is also like dyed in the wool. Like he
Mhm.
is a for sure Cthulhu fan and a horror fan, and so we appreciate being hooked up with somebody who cares about it on a personal level, in addition to from the other side of it.
That felt wrong, and we're gonna cut it. But uh, appreciate the words anyways. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I would say that the product that we're putting out right now, the adventure really, we are calling the Lantern of Ishintakanub, and we created this content back. Gosh, when was it, Bruce? Like that 2014,
Yes, yeah, it was 8 or 9 years ago.
8 or 9 years ago.
Um,
We had been running at Gen Con. We'd been running these big Call of Cthulhu open games with like 13 players, 6, 7, 8 hours, depending, locked in a room and wrestling with our crazy schemes. And when this opportunity came along, we were like, hey, this thing could really be a fun adventure for people that are not in a convention setting. Although I think it'd still make a dynamite convention game too. But it really spans period of time that we don't think is really Cthulhu really addresses much, which is the Weird West.
Hmm.
There's been a few forays into it, but we really like cowboys and cultists. We think that the Lonesome Prairie is a perfect place for the tentacly evil to infiltrate. So
I
that's what
love
we're
it.
doing.
I love it. Um, Penny Arcade put out. It's been several years now. A 6-part miniseries for Call of Cthulhu, where it was focused in like a Weird West setting. And
Correct. Correct.
oh my gosh, like that was right in the midst of me getting kind of invested in this mythos. And so this cowboys and cultists idea is like bedrock for my
Yeah. Oh, for
love
you
of,
personally.
yeah,
Yeah.
personally, for my obsession with this genre kind of has tendrils reaching all the way
Yeah.
back to the beginning.
Yeah, and that is an excellent series, and I go back to that frequently just to see how to do it. Like, you always think you're doing it right, but it's
Yeah,
always good to check out other people's work and be like, okay, like, could I make this better? Did they
yeah,
do something there that I could have done better in mine?
yeah,
So I think we're always cognizant of what comes before, but we want to create new stuff. You know, we
yeah,
want to create more stuff for those people. There's probably a lot of people out there like you. They're like, hey, I wish there was more things like this. So we just figured we'd lean in.
Like
yeah.
Briscoe County Jr.
Yeah, Briscoe County Jr. was a big influence.
Mm,
That was a Sam Raimi made it, but I think Bruce
Bruce
Campbell
Campbell.
starred in it,
okay.
and it was definitely a Weird West.
yeah, if you're not familiar with it, look it up.
Definitely check it out.
It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. I think it's only 2 seasons,
Okay, so it's
but
like a
it's sort of
TV
that
series.
same.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
it's like Xena or Hercules. It's
Okay,
in that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
same style.
Yeah, only it's the West.
Only it's the West.
Mm.
And Bruce Campbell is chewing up cardboard scenery like you would expect him to.
Yes.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
and I always have as one of my uh, uh, influences Wild Wild West, the
Oh,
TV show, not the movie.
not the movie, the TV show.
Not,
Okay, I was
not
gonna
the movie,
ask.
the TV
Gonna ask
show.
which way you swung there.
The,
That's
the movie
interesting.
the movie does have some redeeming qualities,
It has
but
some
It
charm.
is.
Yeah,
There is a giant mechanical spider. So
yeah, okay, yeah, and
we got to
honestly,
give it
that
credit
can
for
go
that.
both ways. That can
yeah,
either be good or bad. But the original Wild Wild West was just like Bruce. That's awesome you mentioned that, because I used to wait for that, and I always wondered what scene they would freeze on and
Uh-huh.
then zoom it. That's
Yeah,
always
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah. And I'd say another influence on this game, it takes the investigators from the middle of the desert into the heart of a city over time, and so it's kind of like a coming in from the wilderness,
Yeah.
and the characters can either play. It's kind of broken into two parts. They can play one part or the other, or both of them together. So and it's going to be really table driven. We're taking some cues from like OSR stuff and procedure based gaming, where there's going to be a lot of little like, hey, this is how you figure out if people get crushed by the rocks,
Mm-hmm.
or this is this is what happens if the mine elevator snaps, or whatever. We're trying to put a lot of that in the hands of the GM to make rulings,
Yeah.
not to go to the rules,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. Too many rules, you just end up looking stuff up all the time. You should trust your GM, in a good game. And this would require that. I mean, you got to make stuff up as you go. So we're excited about that, introducing that to a lot more people.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. What do you think? Let me take like a half a step back here, in the sense of, what do you think makes the crossroads of um, the mythos and Wild West such a fascinating place to explore?
Bruce, you have
Well,
any?
for me, I love uh, while Lovecraft focuses his stories on the northeast of the United States. Um, I like and a lot of Lovecraft stuff is like closed in and
Yeah.
tight.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of taking that to a wide open area, and where lots of Lovecraft stuff is claustrophobic.
Yeah.
Being out in the open spaces of the West, you can try to turn it into more of a agoraphobic
Ooh.
situation. Um, and I also really like the ideas of using trying to create a more 19th century American mythos.
Mm-hmm.
Use those use those tropes and ideas in the stories.
I knew I liked you for a reason, Bruce.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now
yeah,
we know.
that's a great. That's a that I think I agree with 100% of all that. I like the loneliness of it.
There's nowhere to
Like
hide.
there's nowhere to hide. So it's like when you're in a tight box and the closet door opens up and out come the tentacles, that's one thing. But how much more horrible to see the tentacles coming from 10 miles away and know I cannot get away from this. It doesn't matter how hard I ride this horse. It doesn't, they're going to, I'm trapped in a bigger box.
It's nowhere to hide, but at the same point, like the expansiveness. So I live in Kansas City, or just west of Kansas City, right? So I'm in the
You know
heart of
all about it.
this, right? There's an expansiveness, but there's a false security to, I can see for miles, I can't get snuck up on, right? Or whatever. Like this idea of, but the truth of the matter is that even the prairie, there is pockets and cavities and crevasses and like sudden manifestations can happen even in our quote unquote real world. And driving down, you'll have something jump out in front of you just out in the open, right? But that's there's a fascination there. I love that you brought up, though, the the openness, both of you, because that to me is like when you come out to Kansas, right? Like, or even further west to like western Kansas, like you can, the thing that it does that you can't really get in much other places, especially to the east, is your periphery like expands, right? You don't realize how much just like trees or hills or buildings just kind of keep you focused on what's in front of you. And it's only when you're like driving down a I-70, and you can literally, the sky goes to the edge of your vision over here and the edge of your vision over here, right?
Right.
and
Right.
and you realize that the world is wider, and the Cthulhu mythos has so many terrible things that can envelop that wideness,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
enclosed spaces feel contained. Anyway, it's
Too
very cool.
much, too much
Yeah,
space can be terrifying.
Yeah.
Too
Yeah.
much
yeah,
space can be terrifying.
and I always there's the classic Western movie landscape of the group of riders riding through Monument
Yeah.
Valley.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's on the other side of all those mesas?
Mm-hmm.
What's coming up out of the shadows?
Mm-hmm. Mm. Oh my gosh. This
Yeah.
is this
and
is
and and, and I mean the also it's just a cool genre.
yeah.
You know, it's gunslingers and horses and rough talk and hard riding, and you know there are all these. It's our American myth
Yeah.
is the West.
Yeah.
So not to be put too fine a point on it, but like the myth and the mythos, I don't take the mythos as gospel. It's just the best guess that tiny minds can make of something incomprehensible. Well, I think that's kind of how you feel when you're under the big sky. You know, it's like, how do you describe this? Like you described it as periphery to periphery, right? But you know, that's just the best you can do at the moment, right?
Yes.
Because you've
Yes.
got to be there and experience it. So I think that's a big part of it too, is just being able to create this sense of you know, hopelessness, loneliness, the people who were drifters. How many serial killers were there in the old West? We didn't used to call them that,
No.
but those were the guys who had 22 notches on their belt. You know, they
Yeah.
just went around killing people. And some of those people were really definitely insane.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so they end up like that, you know, too much time under the sun, man. And then little things started whispering in your mind. And
Mm.
that's the end of you.
Or
Well,
elder giant things started whispering in your mind.
You totally.
and the second part of this adventure takes place in a completely different kind of classic American landscape,
Hmm.
and that's in the melting pot that was San Francisco at the turn of the 20th century,
Mm. Mm.
with all of the different cultures that gathered in that one spot, and some of the interactions between them, um, massaged with some mythos.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
and I don't know. I'm kind of a Star Trek fan.
Susan is writing this part of the
So
book too.
so
So
I'm actually a huge Star Trek fan, but I really love Next Generation. And if anyone else is, if you remember the episode Time's Arrow, where they end up in San Francisco around 1890 something, and
they run into Mark Twain.
yeah, the Mark Twain episode is probably more familiar from that aspect. But I always really enjoy that one. And so the setting for this is San Francisco, 1894. And after the big World's Fair in Chicago the year before, the Columbian Exposition, uh, California wanted to get in on some of that. And so they actually brought a bunch of the machinery and different things that were like kind of built up there,
mhm.
actual exhibitions, and brought them out to California, and they wanted to showcase California's, up and comingness,
Yeah.
and so they built a big fairgrounds and all this stuff in San Francisco, what is now Golden Gate Park, and there's a lot of potential for cultist activity, if you will, in this area because of this melting pot.
Yep.
And it's a lot of fun. There were a lot of really creepy things that were actually involved in the real exhibition, Winter's Exposition in San Francisco. Just there's a Dante's Inferno exhibit where real life, where people would go into a dragon's mouth and then they would experience the lake of fire and all these different, and there were people dressed up as devils, and so this just really inspired me, and it's a great backdrop for the story. So it's a great, I think, it's a great follow up, just a little more advancement in time, and um, uh, a great um, expansion of the western story, kind of westward expands into San Francisco.
Yeah.
We've that as much as I love the Wild West, I'm fascinated always to find like little corner pockets of history that I don't know a lot about,
Yeah,
and to
yeah,
like find the weirdness there. So that what you just said and talked about like a Dante's Inferno exhibit and the winter exhibitions in San Francisco, like that's like, oh, I want to now. You've given me a treat for this afternoon, right? That I could go plumb a Wikipedia article or something and find out
Mhm.
more. Um,
It's also sort of an homage, I think. I think what we've said before too. It's this Briscoe County Junior or like Wild Wild West influence on one side meets sort of like a 19th century Big Trouble in Little China.
yeah, yeah, ah,
So we're hoping that in the end, we're hoping that what people can take away from it is like the first part of it is a lot about finding things, but generally kind of being clueless about what's going on. Like the protagonists are more or less surprised,
yeah,
and they have to react to all these things that are suddenly happening. Oh my god!
yeah.
Uh, the second half, the NPCs are much more calculating
Mm,
and they are not ignorant of what they are dealing with. In fact, they're all too aware of what they're dealing with, and it's down to the investigators to plumb the depths of those plots and do what they will. I've always said in Cthulhu, you're free to join the opposition
mm.
at any time. Just let go.
It's
If
so
you
easy.
want to be
Yeah,
a bad guy and these cultists are really appealing to you, there's no better compliment you can give to me as a GM than to say, I just give in. I
yeah.
just give in.
You know what? They're
I
making
just
some
don't
good
know what you're
points.
gonna say. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh, so all this talk has got me fixated on another element. I'll just say it again so it sticks in people's mind. But we're talking about the Lantern adventure that's coming to Kickstarter. But we talked a little bit about the settings, right? We have San Francisco and we have the weird Wild West. Um, what type of Cthulhu story are we telling here? So there's rumblings in what you just said of like mystery or suspense, but there's so many like and you talked about being fans of horror before, but there's also pulp and there's also action and like uh there's a wide swath, even in our current slate of RPGs that we have available to us, of what a Cthulhu story can do, or what it's trying to accomplish, or what other genres it's playing in. What do you think the Lantern is good at from a story type perspective?
Well, I think the authors can probably speak specifically to it better than I can, but
Uh-huh.
I'll just give this framing device for it, which is all the things we've ever written together. We wanted to create novel circumstances that put big challenges in front of people, ethically, morally, whatever. And they have to make decisions. It's not just, I see a monster, I have to do something about it. There's usually more going on than that. So, thematically, what we think it can do is it can make people look at actual problems,
Yeah,
not that we ladle it on real heavy, real world wise,
sure.
but they can see in the drama what we're echoing, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important because fear is one of the central things that we all deal with all the time. And it gives opportunities for people to like face fears and tackle big subjects and then afterwards have a beer and move on. Like it doesn't have to be this heavy thing. It's just a light way of kind of raising things up, like a movie or a TV show or whatever. It's lightweight generally, but if it can show you something interesting, that's what I always want to do. I want to have there be something that people can take away and be like, wow, that was cool because it made me think. Um, but I don't know. What do you guys
Yeah,
think?
I think the underlying theme is about transformation,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not transformation in a constructive way. It's transformation against your will.
Mutations. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yes, and so I think for the players it'll be about um, trying to figure out who their characters are and who their characters really are at their core, and then either fighting against these transformations or giving in.
Hmm. Hmm. That's perfect. I'm hooked. Sign me up, Bruce. I'm all here.
What do you think?
Yeah. I guess for me, it's I just like the idea of there being something out there that um, can start as, hey, I've just discovered this thing in the first part, to now it's expanding in power, and it's drawing more people in. And I like objects that I like the transformation idea, that which is ultimately what it's doing, I guess. So but I don't know, I just like things to be crazy. Like
Yeah.
people
Well,
losing their minds.
Not to be heavy. I certainly don't want to be heavy about it, but I described this to somebody 2 days ago who's not really involved in gaming. They were just like, "Well, what are you working on?" I told them what I was working on, and this guy goes, "Oh, it's about cancer. It's about
Oh,
it's about people dealing with a change in their life that they can't stop. Like they and
Hmm.
it's dry, it's pushing them forward." And it turns out that this person had been a cancer survivor. So as soon as I said all these things,
wow,
like
yeah,
that
yeah,
snapped for him. Now that was certainly not a thing that I thought of,
Yeah.
but that just goes to show you that like people are going to take away. I'm really sorry. Can you hear that noise?
Slightly, but I may be able to scrub it in post.
Okay. Well, yeah, either way.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll find
so
out.
anyway, it's really distracting to me because it's super loud on my end. Of course, somebody's running a drill right now in the middle of one. So we'll scrub all that. So we don't have to get into any of that stuff. I just thought it was an interesting aside because this person just totally twigged on it immediately. They were like, "Oh, that's what this is about,"
yeah.
and I was like, as an uninitiated person, just hearing a rough outline, I'm okay with that. Whatever
and
you want to take away from it.
Well, and
and
that's
if you
transformation. I mean, that's
yeah
Right.
if you think about it, that fits in really nicely with some of the elements that we threw in because they were cool, but fit with that theme.
yeah,
I mean, the initial germ for the Wild West part of the story um, was uh, having a nameless, faceless elder that had no consciousness,
Hmm.
and because of the era that I grew up in the 70s and 80s, um, that was thermonuclear war.
Hmm.
And where was the genesis of that? Um, so the Wild West part is set in the north of the New Mexico territory, um, in a valley that is uh, uh, um, filled with poplar trees.
Hmm.
And the Spanish for poplar is Alamo. So it takes place in the valley where Los Alamos, New Mexico is.
Hmm.
So I think a lot of times we'll take like a point in history and then we'll just run it back or run it forward.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we did all this nuclear testing there. Okay, well, what if it wasn't nuclear testing? What if it was tampering with forces beyond their control, which it could be both, right?
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of that in our storytelling too. But I want to assure people that there are dark artifacts, there are
oh yeah,
evil people, there's all the things that you want in a Cthulhu story, but we just feel like it should be more than just the classic idea of like pouring through musty old volumes. There's no real there's a little bit of it, but a lot of it is like more action oriented. Like the characters have to go out and find clues. They don't just open a book and make a check necessarily. They have to maybe talk to the person who owns the book and they give them the clue, and that's with an interaction.
Hmm.
So
and if
it's
someone's really more into the more researchy aspects, or that kind of thing, there's definitely more of that in the second part, or more opportunity for it, because
you're in the big city.
you're in the big city.
Yeah.
There's libraries, there's museums, there's experts,
We've tried to keep it loose
curio
too,
shops.
where one of the things that we really think is important is to just say, here's how we did it.
Yeah.
This goes against my Mandalorian philosophy of this is the way. When you buy this product or experience it as a player or as a keeper, that doesn't apply. Do what you want with it. If you don't like something we wrote, change it. Please make it better. Tell me about it at a convention. I will probably go, cool. Because it's not about there being one way. It's about whichever way people want to run it. And so we've left a lot of GM advice in that says, hey, if you have more like nerdy bookish investigators that crop up and they want that library, there's no reason that you can't have a dusty old library in the middle of New Mexico. It's just in the richest guy's house, and it's a personal library.
Yeah.
It just, you can always pivot and shift. So we do a lot of prompting. Just say, hey, think of these 5 things, and then, or if you need a description, here's a brief description.
I like what you've been talking about, and I think Bruce, what you touched on there. I like the idea that first off, I'm a huge fan of alternative histories, but I'm even more a fan of what you all just alluded to, which is this idea that if you play the record of history backwards, you see the manipulations of the mythos, right? Like the idea that
Yeah.
it's not that it's there all the time and it's not an alternative history, it's just something that's been in underneath the surface. And if we just if we just know where to look, we could see those interactions. Like to me, that's not something that every genre by default can do in an RPG, right? You can't necessarily do that in fantasy or sci-fi or even some modern games or whatnot, but you can do it when you go into like these like period piece stories. And what you threaten to do with something like this is create not just a fascinating RPG, but a fascination for that moment in history within the player, right?
Right.
I love this story. I love Los Alamos, the idea of the poplar trees, and these little bits of lore that Bruce has sprinkled within, or that Susan you sprinkled within. You're gonna play through this adventure, and you're gonna have a great time. But there's for every group of people that come and sit down, with a great game master, there's gonna be one or two or six of those people that walk away from that and like, I love that, and they're gonna next time they're in a bookstore, next time they're browsing Netflix, next time they're whatever,
Mhm.
they're gonna
Mhm.
be drawn to those same points in time, and I think that that's really cool, and I always feel like as obsessive nerds and like tabletop game enthusiasts, we're in a very narrow spectrum of a community, right? The wider world at large has a hard time sometimes identifying with what we do and what we're about.
Mhm.
It's very rare. It does happen where you get those touch points like you just mentioned, Danny, where you have like the person who's like, "Oh, it's cancer," and they're like, "Oh, well, that you just did a lot of my work for me," and like
Yeah, yeah,
connecting
for
with you,
sure, for
right? Like
sure.
that's not the norm. Typically, you say, "Oh, I live in a fantasy world for 16 hours a day," and they say, all right, well, good for you, I
Right.
guess. Like that's not
Yeah,
my
yeah,
world,
yeah.
right? But I love this because you're gonna pick up things and find things interesting about these that you can then carry with you into the real world, and they make great bridges
Yeah.
to the rest of your acquaintances and peers. And I always like that because it's just one more way of drawing people in and about making what we do and what we're obsessed with that much more approachable and acceptable and interesting to the world at large. Why do you know so much about San Francisco at the turn of the 20th century, Susan? Well, I was researching for this book that I write. Oh, wow, that's cool, right? Like,
Yeah.
um,
And I think it points out too that you can just get interested in something.
Yeah.
yeah,
It doesn't have to be something you do in your whole life.
yeah,
You can just say, from now on, I'm really interested in this, and go ahead and be interested in it. I told I don't know who I was telling a couple weeks ago. I said, obviously, the best compliment somebody can give me is to buy my book, and then maybe buy the next one. But if the next one ended up being a collection of H.P. Lovecraft stories, I have to say I'd be pretty much the same level of happiness.
uh-huh,
Like
uh-huh,
because you kind of figure it serves both masters, right? Like if they're getting into the Cthulhu mythos, they're going to want to come back for more game.
yeah,
So if I could, it would be nice if it was possible to like just say, hey, here's the thing, and hey, here's like 6 short stories by Lovecraft. You should read these too, uh,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's where you get people really interested in contemplating these bigger questions. So
I'm excited about that. Yeah, yeah. I now we're just sharing stories, but that's great. I was good. I just wrapped up a game of Vampire, and I'm not. I was about to say something I would regret. I have not yet invested myself into the idea of like a hardcore, like the hardcore vampire community, right? Which
yeah,
that's a whole other portion of
it's an
gaming, right?
investment.
Mhm.
Right.
It's an
Yeah.
investment.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's a whole separate topic. But so I had a group that said we really want to play vampire, so give us a vampire story one way or another, right? And so what I did is I put together one called Backwoods by Night, which is I'm like I can only tell you what I know about, right? I can't do Chicago by night or Seattle by night or LA by night and give you these big urban sprawl adventures. What I can give you is I live on the outskirts of Kansas City and I used to live in like the backwoods of Kansas, right? And so I can tell you the story of like vampires that lived in the heyday of like cattle auctions and stockyards and everything that's in the fringes of Kansas City, and I can tell you about the weirdness that still exists in the southern parts and the missile silos that are abandoned and the blah blah blah. Like I can do that sort of a story, right?
Yep.
And what I found fascinating even in that is when you get to draw upon the real world, there's just so much information that by the end, like that game was transformative to how what I saw that RPGs could do because I get through it and my players are out there being like, "Oh, I'm pulling up maps of South Kansas and I'm looking through and I'm looking at towns and looking at the topography and like trying to evaluate where vampires might be and I'm trying to like where would they hide and like I'm there's the cattle company, there's this like who where's the big buildings over there and like what where would a vampire like that's all not me, right? That's all not something that I had to do. That just fell in the lap when you have this. And
Right.
Yeah.
um, it's
Well,
very
you always
fascinating.
write what you know, right? So how are you supposed to write Cthulhu? Because it's right, but that's not the part I know.
Right.
The part I know is how to set up a scene to like maximally punch someone in the mouth quickly with a shock, right? That's what
Yeah.
I know how to do. Bruce has got way better, like Bruce and Susan are way better research and way better details, and they write compelling scenes and all this stuff, right? My job really most of the time is just go, hey, how about we just switch these two scenes?
Yeah.
And if we all agree, then and how we end it here, but then we don't ever really answer that question. So that's what I know. So when I write what I know, that's the only part sometimes that I know.
Yeah.
Well, well,
It's weird.
I love using real world um, environments to run games in um, for the kind of thing that you were talking about, Zach. There's an immediate shorthand that you don't have to explain
Yeah.
everything.
Mhm.
Even my fantasy games, when I run D&D, I run in a pseudo European
Yeah.
setting, so there's all that backstory and environment that everybody just kind of clues in on without having to explain everything. And when you're running a game like a modern game or a recent past 19th 20th century game, um, it's easy for characters or for players to buy in because they can just look up stuff on Wikipedia and you can just immediately drop it into your game.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's backstory that um, uh, the players come up with, which is, in my opinion, the best kind of backstory because it's one the GM doesn't have to worry about.
Yeah.
At least the GM has to worry about how to tie it into the game, but that's usually the easy part.
Yeah. It's
Yeah. And let's be honest, GM's here. Susan hasn't run a game yet, but I know she will be soon.
I'm not going to comment.
You're not going to comment on it? Not even Avatar, the role playing game?
I actually am leaning more towards that Appalachian.
Appalachia.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah, that looks
yeah, that new thing that
amazing. Oh
just
my
dropped
God.
yeah.
from
Yeah. Yeah.
MCG. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
so excited. Then that fits right in with all this too, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that what Bruce says is right on the money. Like you create that immediate touchstone. I was going to go back to what you said about when people start showing up with maps. If people start showing up at the game with their own props, you either are playing a Cthulhu game or a vampire game.
Yeah.
You know, and that's when you know that this game has got legs because people are showing up in costume. You know, they've spent some time cosplaying over the week. You know,
Yeah.
which I think is great too because it shows that you've got real investment from the players. And how many times have we heard the players say something and we were about ready to do A, and they said, "Well, I take the red car that's in the parking lot and I take off,"
Mhm.
and you're like, "Great."
Yeah.
And you just take all your notes and push them off to one side, and you go, "Okay, you tear off down Sunset Boulevard. You're going about 90 miles an hour." Well, you know, that's so essential. That's the thing I think that a lot of GMs and players need to keep high in mind is that the GM is wants you to have a great time, but there's another part of that where you have to, I guess, give back, whatever you want to call it. But the
Mm.
player gives back so much to the GM. It's not really an asymmetrical relationship. I think some people think, oh, the GM does all the work. That is, in my experience, that is not true. We do a lot of the work, the obvious stuff, but so much of what comes to a great horror game, especially where suspense is needed, is people understanding when to be quiet, when to investigate. Don't try to treat it like a, we're all going to pull out our guns and start shooting. It's like that's not the way it is.
Yeah.
It's much more subtle than that. So that's my hope for it, is that people get some of that subtlety. If they don't, it'll still be a rollicking adventure.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, so let's start to draw it back, and start to at least draw this to a close. So going back to the Lantern as a product, this is a digital, like, two-part adventure that you got releasing. What is your that seems small, and not in a bad way, just like that's a singular idea. But I know that there is a bigger vision, or more stories that you want to tell. Is this the granule of an idea that kind of stands alone, or are there other pieces that that this fits into down the road?
Well, I'd say just to frame it, and then people should
Yeah.
chime in. The provenance of this thing was from a one shot at a convention. So,
Yeah.
so if you were just to go by the book, I would say this is a standalone adventure.
Yeah.
We didn't write a bunch
Again.
more Weird West. This is just something we did, and we thought it was pretty polished, and you liked it, and we all kind of moved forward
Yeah.
with it. But I think we do have a series that we are working on that also is in the same vein of historical kind of what ifism.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see tying together. We have the working title of it, of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but it is a series of games that takes place at different points in history, and has a center point on either being in the air, on a train, or in a car. And we run them at conventions that are a lot of fun. That could be another way to do more alternative history stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I'm super open if people like this. I think that's the big part of it. If people dig this, then if they said, "Hey, what happened after San Francisco?" Then I don't think that we would shy away from writing that. That'd be great. There's more story to tell there for sure. Because truthfully, the bad guys in most of these things can't really ever be put away.
No.
They just go into hiding or move on to greener pastures or whatever else. But it's not like
Remission.
Or go
they
back
go
to
into
sleep.
remission. They go into remission.
That's one of the great things about the mythos, right? Is that the villains are going to outlive the PCs, or at least outlast the PCs. We'll put it that way, right? Like
Right.
almost always, and that means that, yeah, there's always something to return to. But you may not return with the same characters, but you can return to that story, that setting, that place and time with fresh perspective. I really like that idea. I like this idea of. I mean, I know Zach is doing it over on the fantasy horror side of our project list and things, like this idea of, like, let's drop singular stories, one shots, or shorter adventure modules that you can get a taste for and you can experience and you can insert it into your own campaign, or you can just have a great 3-session play experience. But it's also, I'm just a big fan of that in general, in the sense of, like, it can be that testing ground to see, like, oh, is there an avenue for a bigger, wider experience here? But it's also just like, I want that little dab of an experience, and then I want to go have another dab over here, and I want to have another dab over here. I like
Right.
the tasting menu approach
Mhm.
to gaming. And my favorite Cthulhu experiences are one shots, right? Where
Right.
it's in and out. So you're creating something that exactly appeals to how I want to ingest this genre. So that's very cool.
Yeah, and I think we have the benefit of waiting. We
Yeah.
can launch it, see how it goes, and then we figure it out.
Yeah.
But there's nothing. I don't think. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think. I mean, we because we had at Gen Con and other conventions, we ran a series of these games, and which this one had that kernel in it. I definitely like the different points in time, and that I would love to be able to bring some of those out for home games and stuff too. I think I don't know. I think they're a lot of fun. A lot of the historical settings, definitely the real world historical setting
That's
makes
your
it a lot of
jam.
fun.
That's
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
jam. Yeah.
That's rad. Awesome. Okay, so the lantern. It's going to be called just to allay concerns. The adventure's title may be the full title might be The Lantern of Ishkan Takanoob. Did I say that
Yep.
right? Okay, great.
Yep.
But you can
You got it.
find
You got it better than anybody else gets it. So.
okay, great.
I still haven't said it right once.
Yeah.
Make
My,
a sanity check.
my
Make a
elders.
sanity check, Bruce. Keep saying it enough.
That's right. No, it's when you fail the sanity check. That's when you
Yeah,
actually
then
say
you'll
it
be able
right.
to say it.
Yeah,
Then
that's
you'll
All
be
right.
able to
right,
say
I made my sand check.
That's right.
it.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so this is good. It's just going to be the Lantern of Cthulhu Epics
You're right.
adventure on Kickstarter. This is coming to Kickstarter in August of 2023. But you're like you've already been talking about this, but the adventure is basically done. It's you I think you said right now as we speak it's like 75-80% complete, and by the time it goes to Kickstarter they'll be that much more progressed. So this is something that is going to have a quick turnaround and all that sort of jazz, and we're really excited to see. This is obviously launching on the same profile that Andrew Hindenburg, who came on the show a while back, did Frigid Fathoms, which is his submarine elder gods approach to a little short adventure. This is more expansive than that. The Lantern, I think what you said, Danny, correct me if I'm wrong. This is like a 48 page.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at. I mean, we're going to include some ancillary information and maybe break that 48er into 2 PDFs.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of having all the stats and mechanics in one book and having most of the story and flow in the other book, so that you're just not page flipping a lot or getting lost. You can just kind of tell the story, and when you need the right stats, you just flip in the other book, and then you got that. Or just having open 2 PDFs.
Fantastic. Okay, so you can check out the Lantern as it launches. You can follow the World of Game Design Facebook page if you're following this right, want to follow this right away. The best way to do that is to go there. Though the landing page where you'll be able to follow the project will be up in the next few days as well.
Correct.
The other thing that we haven't brought up, and I want to give you an opportunity here, Danny and Susan, at the end to talk about is Delving Wood, just for a couple moments. Not this is a whole separate thing, but we've gotten to know you guys now a little bit, and if people have made it this far, then they hopefully like you and say, well, these are cool people that I want to know more about. So
Wait till they meet us in person.
that's right. That's right.
Dicks.
So you do Cthulhu Epics with us. You also have Delving Wood. That's the sound of the drills and things like that. Is because you basically live an enormous part of your day in a shop, and Delving Wood
That
is
is
part of that. So
that is true.
say just a little bit about what you do when you're not writing archaic stories.
Yeah, and so what we make is right now our primary product is a thing called map tiles, and they look like they're wooden map tiles.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, this presentation of them is about the most boring way I can show them, because we have literally dozens of different shapes, and you can do all sorts of crazy things with them. We had a Kickstarter back at the beginning of the year, very successful. Definitely was able to increase our capabilities to do stuff around here. But we have a shop with a big laser and a big CNC and a bunch of 3D printers. And we're actually making a physical side of game accessories as well, right here in the state of Wisconsin, handmade stuff by us. And hopefully you'll see some of this stuff at upcoming conventions. We're going to be at Game Hole Con. And we're just building another whole. So there's the writing part of it and the publishing part of it, which we're partnering with World of Game Design. But then there's this other side of us that is doing dice towers, dice rollers, custom screens. We're focusing kind of on Cthulhu stuff right now. and that's what we do for a living. It's our full-time gig, both of us. So
Perfect.
we are in the process of living the dream, I guess.
Awesome.
Sometimes it seems a little nightmarish,
The
but
inside shot of
that's okay.
delvingwood.com.
Delvingwood.com. Yeah, if you want to check it out.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. And then Bruce, you mentioned it at the beginning. I really just wanted to live there for a few minutes. But we'll give you an opportunity here. You mentioned at the beginning that you design escape rooms as the thing that pays the bills to a large
Yes.
extent. If people want to experience a Bruce Taylor escape room, is there opportunities for that, and where might people get those opportunities?
They will be in Chicago.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I cannot say where. The first room will be open probably October or November of this year.
Nice. Okay, very close. Awesome. Fantastic. And is there a site or social media platform or something that people could go if they want to check out more of that or follow that? I know you're not the only person working on that, so I may be asking the wrong person, but
Uh, I don't have a website, but if you're interested in talking about escape rooms or escape room design, you can email me at adventuresandinvestigations@gmail.com.
nice, perfect. Okay, that works.
I'm,
Excellent.
I'm just really glad that when you said, where can you experience one of Bruce's escape rooms, he didn't say through that door over my right shoulder.
Yes.
Two go in, but only one comes out.
Oh my gosh. Well, hey, thank you, Bruce, Danny, Susan, for hanging out with me.
Thank you,
It's
man.
been a delight on a Thursday morning to get to chat and some of my new favorite friends and acquaintances and peers. So appreciate you guys and appreciate you guys creating with me on this project. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Right on.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks a
Zach.
lot.
Thank you.
All right. Well, hey, folks, again, check out the Lantern on Kickstarter. You don't need to know any more than that. Go find it. And until then, we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.